This is Implicating the Real. My name is Michael.
My name is Joe. We're starting at session 515, right?
Yeah.
On page 24. We're continuing chapter 2 of Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, actually by Seth, dictated by Jane Roberts, and
Yeah, if you're buying the gimmick here.
written by Robert, right? Because he's the one who wrote everything down.
Yeah. There's
So-
lots of Roberts involved. It's funny, there's a genre of dream books, and several of the authors have like Robert in their name.
Weird.
Like they have Jane Roberts, Robert Butts. I don't know if I have many. Like that one's Robert Moss. It's just, I don't know what to make of that sort of thing.
Nominative determinism. Bobby Dreams.
Yeah, so take that for whatever that's worth. Maybe we'll figure that out someday.
Yeah.
It's in a name.
What is in a name? Did you have anything starting right off on this session?
I mean, a lot of this is review to me, so it's not like striking me as intensely as it did the first time, but what do you think? Do you have any questions? Or it's kind of getting right into the inner senses here without like explaining what they are quite yet.
Right. That, I think what I have is that I had a question earlier about what is meant by inner senses, because this chapter has been sort of leading up into introducing the idea of the inner senses.
Yeah.
And I don't think we got exactly to the point last time where we were told, this is what an inner sense is.
I believe somewhere in this book he's going to list them, and I think there's 9 that he gives us, but he might say something like maybe there's an infinite amount of them, or it might be one of those deals.
Things.
But that are 9 are kind of relevant. But I guess, we've been speaking about the outer ego being everything we know and think of ourselves, and the inner ego being this deeper part of ourselves that is actually creating the environment that we're perceiving. And the inner senses are the senses that the inner ego uses. And they're like, of course, to Seth, they're like a much broader, more intense, freer version of our 5 physical senses, I guess.
Right, and they correspond to our senses, but it seems like the way Seth is talking about them, they're less about like integrating external sensation and more about projecting. Or is that the external senses?
Like I'm remembering, maybe it's the first inner sense, but it's called like inner vibrational touch, which means like, I guess it means something like when you make contact in this way with this inner sense with something else, you kind of like instantly have like access to their consciousness or something. I mean, just to give an idea of what it could be, like they're pretty wild. Like the correlation to our physical senses, as far as I understand it, is a very just loose analogy, Yeah. And also the difference being that, what we're perceiving is being created by us. This is still something that's kind of fuzzy to me, but like there's some sort of like reference point that our inner self is using to create these things that exist out of our creation, right?
Yeah, and I think from what I remember, we'll get into that a little more in chapter 3 too, and we'll sort of pick it back up. What I have here is on 25, it says, using the inner senses, we become conscious co-creators, but you are unconscious co-creators, whether you know it or not. So the inner sense is allowing us to all sort of coordinate our creation of reality. Like we're co-creating it with one another.
Yeah, I think part of this is referencing what we were talking about last time with like the idea that, part of our consciousness is just like terraforming other realities for other things. That's the part that what I think of when he's talking about co-creators.
Maybe reading a little more will help the reader understand.
It might, or it'll at least like help us like explicate like the trouble we're having, because he's just like hinting at these things kind of in piecemeal fashion.
Yeah. So Seth says, I'm starting at like right at the bottom of 24 in the middle of the paragraph there, that if we were to be able to use our inner senses properly, you would see an uncamouflaged situation in which events and form were free and not stuck in a jelly-like mold of time. You could see, for example, your present living room not only as a conglomeration of permanent appearing furniture, but switch your focus and see the immense and constant dance of molecules and other particles that compose the various objects. You could see a phosphorescent-like glow, the aura of electromagnetic structures that compose the molecules themselves. You could, if you wish, condense your consciousness until it was small enough to travel through a single molecule, and from the molecule's own world look out and survey the universe of the room and the gigantic galaxy of interrelated, ever-moving star-like shapes. Right?
Yeah. So he's just like giving examples of what can be done with these inner senses, but
because our external senses are stuck in the jelly-like mold.
Yeah, we're using this thing called space and time, which kind of like forms all of our ideas, until we start, waking up out of that.
Yeah. And sort of this view of everything allows you to like have a lot more play in terms of like what world you're perceiving.
Yeah. Maybe it was earlier in the chapter, but I'm remembering him talking about, or maybe this is somewhere else. I'm consuming a lot of Seth material. So
yeah, you are.
But someone asked him like, what does he perceive like through Jane of like other people in the room? And he kind of talks about like he can perceive like their other reincarnational selves and their past and their probable futures. Like all these things are kind of like present, and they seem like such like separate categories to us. So I don't know if like Seth using his inner senses, like it's a different inner sense to perceive like a reincarnational self, or if it's just like we need these categories in the way we discuss them. But it gives you an idea of like the expansive like perception that he's hinting that these inner senses have.
Yeah.
You're like
sort of like
seeing through time.
You have like
time.
this weird like true sense of like being able to like see things how they like truly are.
Yeah.
Like see details of them that you can't otherwise see.
Yeah, and I know in other books, like I feel like Jane and Rob are a little bit obsessed with doing these like culturally faddish psychic experiments where they're like he's trying to, like predict things and stuff like that. And it sounds like, because free will is always operating according to this philosophy, like for every separate consciousness, like predicting the future is tricky because there's all these probable realities. And like he can kind of see like which trajectory something might be on, but they're constantly making decisions and in an environment, co-created environment with other consciousnesses that are making decisions. So like the actual predicting of a future doesn't work quite the way we think it is, because we think there's, I don't know, maybe we don't think that, but like there's like one past and one future, and Seth has different ideas about that.
Well, it's kind of weird because Seth claims to stand outside of time too, right?
Yeah.
So
it's tricky.
So that seems like one of the easy tests of like, oh, you really stand out of time? Okay, what's going to happen a week from now?
Yeah. But I think what he's saying is like all of these potential futures do exist, and he can see them all. And when he's trying to predict what we think of as the future, he's trying to predict the one that like we will select, And
but
it's kind of
they all exist. Are we even selecting them?
That's a good question too,
right? Like it sort of throws the whole idea of Seth's like job or like
it kind of waters everything down, right?
It throws it into question, because it's like, well, why are you trying to educate people if in every possible reality they're either going to be educated or not? Like what are you doing?
That's a good question. I think a couple things. He talks somewhere about like if different probable selves like choose the same path, like there's some sort of like energization that happens.
Yeah.
And I don't know like how much we should try to like seek that, but I think he's trying to really instill our, the idea that we have control and we can have what we want. So it kind of doesn't matter if like in the totality, like all these choices are being taken. Like I am this part of this consciousness. And to me, it matters that to my own value fulfillment, that I can choose the one I want and I can reach as far as I can reach on that path.
Sure, yeah. That sort of seems like self-defeating though, right? Where like the insight of like, oh, there's infinite possibilities that exist, but also they don't matter to you. It's like, well, why did you tell me about them? Like, why does it matter? Like, I already knew possibilities existed. Like, we interact with possibilities every day. Like, to say that possibilities actually exist, like, the actually has to be doing something. Otherwise, it's like, well, it's kind of vacuous.
Yeah, it's a question I think we're gonna have to just keep open as we go, and maybe there'll be like some insight along the way.
Right. Yeah. So
does that kind of answer what you're saying about, inner senses?
Well, from what I'm getting is inner senses let you turn your eyes into a microscope because you can like look inside of molecules and stuff, and you can hang out and chill on the molecules.
Yeah, I think that's just a part of maybe one inner sense, probably.
Yeah.
It's just like that ability to focus kind of loses, the rigid rules of physical reality.
So do you think that the molecules themselves are like more real, or do you think those are also just kind of created by like your senses?
Well, I mean, I feel like what we just got to, like everything by being real, is watered down. Is that kind of where we got to?
Yeah, sort of. I know it's going to come up later. There's like a part where Seth talks about like using your mental capacities, you can like sort of like scooch all the molecules into the right shape, to make like your body and stuff. And it's like an interesting way of saying it because it implies that the molecules already exist or something. That's why I was asking.
He does talk a lot about molecules.
Yeah.
Say that. Today in our book club, Seth Book Club, we were talking about how reality pulses in and out. And there's like, he's talking about there's moments, and this is kind of like what we got to last week with like the frame rate and stuff. He's saying that there's moments where we're like, this reality and our consciousness of it is like completely blank. There's like this pulse. And what I was gathering is like the inner senses and the inner ego are occupying that other side of that pulse that is kind of dark to this part of our consciousness. And the idea of like bridging our consciousness between the inner and outer ego is kind of like being aware of both things. And then once you do that, you're realizing as the inner ego, you're like the creator of the environment. And as the outer ego, you're the experience of the environment. And once you realize this, and that's, I think, what Seth is kind of saying, like they're beyond this point, then you really have this power to just be more freer, more creative, pursue things at just ways we haven't really imagined.
Right, grow yourself a third arm.
Yeah, and somewhere in here he says like, when you're starting out on this path, you can get lost when you like move your focus into like a molecule or something else.
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of like, you get lost, or they have gotten lost, but then they wake up into them greater selves. And maybe that's analogous to what he's talking about, what we are as outer egos.
We were talking about that last time with they take a vacation and they like turn into a tree or something.
Yeah. So it's right prior to that he's talking about sometimes we get lost, or it sounds like, where he's at now, it doesn't happen that often anymore. But
so you could get stuck in like molecule land, like jumping around molecules. And that's kind of the reality. You'd be like, this is just what reality is now.
You just like forget that you were like so much greater.
Right.
Which is totally analogous to what he's saying about us.
Yeah, because that's sort of the takeaway, is that we're sort of forgetful about what physical reality is.
I can't remember if we talked about this on mic yet, but like that always reminds me of that Jewish proverb about an all-seeing, all-present, all-knowing God. What's one thing he doesn't have is limitation. So it goes. And so according to that logic, consciousness like adopts limitation through forgetting that it's everything.
Yeah.
And what I never realized or thought of until I came to Seth was that by adopting this individualization, this pluralization of everything, like new experiences coming out and new creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of like a forgetting in that aspect has this sort of divine quality.
Yeah. I definitely want to pick that up a little bit later because I have some stuff on that when we get to talking about
let's do it.
play. Because I think that's going to be really useful.
Cool. So, yeah, for this part of the book, does that answer what we can answer about inner senses?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was interesting, Seth talks about like internal feelings of like time slowing down or speeding up. I thought that was something that people can like pretty easily like think about and be like, oh yeah, that's something that I've like experienced before,
Yeah, when doesn't compare their experience of time to our emotions or the intensity of our emotions, something like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because like time for them is all about like intensity of the emotional content of the time, not so much like measurement of the time.
Yeah, it's right here. We experience time, or what you would call its equivalent nature, in terms of intensities of experience, a psychological time with its own peaks and valleys. This is somewhat similar to your own emotional feelings, and time seems speeded up or slowed down, but vastly different in important ways.
Yeah. I feel like that's like pretty commonsensical. Like I feel like most people have had that experience,
Yeah, I think the more challenging thing is to like draw the conclusions and start like perceiving reality in a way that doesn't have time as a foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, that's been like a continual challenge.
Well, yeah, because like emotional intensity has a time-based aspect to it, right? Like how can you have a timeless emotion is like part of a question,
Yeah. I think where we kind of tried to like explain it last week was like the frame rate thing. And suddenly you have this greater ability. The emotional intensity is like increasing your frame rate.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more frames per second. But like even talking about this is using, that per second is using time as part of the definition. So
I found this to be true also, like, in not even just like time-based things, but like, I feel like there's the experience of like, if you really stop and consider just like some piece of your environment, it's always been striking to me that you can never run out of details.
right.
Like you can like just be waiting for the bus, and just like looking at the sidewalk and you
Yeah.
start noticing the little blades of grass and you start noticing the little cracks and you start seeing the little variations in the coloration, of the dirt. And it's like, you can do this forever. You can always keep looking and looking and looking and find more and more details
There's
in the
always
same location.
Yeah, there's always more there. And that's kind of what Seth's definition of camouflage reality is. That like there's the part you can see, but there's like a depth. So like again, I'm just using the most basic example is like a hunter dressed in camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
You just see some bushes or trees are part of the environment, but there's such a greater depth there.
Yeah.
Actually.
Right. And to me, that's always been sort of an indication of like maybe one of the best ways to define what reality is this sort of quality of like, what's the word? When you like withdraw from something and you like completely use it all up. What's that called?
Withdraw from something and complete.
Like, if you have like a well, you can only take so much water from it, right?
Yeah, there's a finite amount or
Yeah. Maybe like infinitude in that sense. Or like, gosh, there's like a word for it. I'll probably just figure it out later after we've done recording. But like to me, that's what it seems like. If there's anything that indicates a reality to be reality, it's like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That it's like you can just continue drawing from it forever and just like never get to the end of it.
Yeah. This conversation or this part of it makes me think of like a quibble I have when people like look out through our new telescopes and like, they start to get a sense of how grand or never ending the physical universe is. And then they equate it to like our insignificance, or they look at the broad strokes of time and then they like point to our own insignificance. And I'm like, size and importance, I don't think are on the same scale. They're like, they're conflating things there because just like you said, like, it doesn't matter how big you are or how long your life is. It's like that intensity. There's always more there.
Right.
Like you could go the other way and like look at the smallest tiny particle in your body and then say like, I'm so important.
Yeah.
And
actually,
it sounds really ridiculous when you do it that way.
But you really could, It's like picking one person out of however many, billions of people or whatever, it's like one person's life is like in its own little universe of itself. It's also sort of, there's this inexhaustible quality of like a human being.
Yeah. And I think we recognize that. And that's part of like Seth's message is, the eternal validity of the soul. And he repeatedly says like every consciousness, like no matter how small, like has its own validity and unique, never repeated experience.
Yeah, right.
It's talking more about like how he connects with Jane, that they find like a psychological, psychic distance from each of their core selves, which I think is kind of interesting just to like note that it's somehow it's helpful for them both to make their connection away from each of themselves. Did you?
Yeah, where they sort of had to find a space in between like Seth and Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to like meet in the middle a little bit. That's sort of an interesting thing. That I know, skipping ahead a little bit, but I know that comes up too in chapter 3, where Seth has to talk about like the preparation he has to do to be able to like go into like a universe and like teach there,
Yeah, because he's kind of talking there about like he has to do this not just for our reality and our set of rules and root assumptions,
but just for like any of them,
for all of them. And so he has to have a level of familiarity and has to tailor his projection to each one.
Yeah.
His communication.
So it's like that interesting thing. And I've been like running up into this when I've been reading it too, where there's like, if you do buy the sort of Seth Jane synthesis like story, there's like certain things that are explained by that, where you're like, well, why is this thing described this way? And it's like, well, that might just be like, that's the way Jane thinks about it,
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're not really talking to Seth as much as you're talking to like the Seth Jane, right?
Right.
Because it's both of them.
He says that any idea is kind of colored by the consciousness that holds it or communicates it.
Yeah. Like one that I think of is later on in chapter 3, he brings up the example of like, oh, your body doesn't just regenerate itself every 7 years, which like we now know like that's not actually like medically true.
Yeah.
But that was like that's like a commonly held folk belief.
Something Jane would have believed in at that time, probably.
Right, exactly. That's like a way Jane would have been thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So like Seth like picks up on that as the example.
Do you know much about that? I guess I've always heard that and just like assumed there was some sort of like science behind it, but
I mean, I looked it up after reading that part. Right?
Okay, what did you find out?
So different body parts regenerate at different rates. It's like your stomach lining regenerates like within a week,
I think what I had originally heard, and let me know what you found out, but like that after 7 years, like even the slowest part of you has like regenerated. But is that not true?
That's not true. Because bones take more than 7 years. It takes something like 10 years. And there are certain parts of your body that never regenerate. Like some parts of your heart are just the same muscles your entire life.
Easy.
The lens in your eye, the same lens your entire life. And a lot of your neurons in your brain.
Yeah.
Same neurons.
It reminds me of, I heard, I don't know, probably on some podcast, women carry like eggs that they'll pass on to their like granddaughter. Have you heard something like that?
I feel like that can't be possible.
We're out of our depth here.
Well, but that can't be possible because their daughter is one of those eggs. So you'd have to shove eggs in the other eggs. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what I'm thinking of, but something along those lines.
You might be thinking of mitochondrial DNA.
Maybe.
Because the mitochondrial DNA is part of the egg cell, but it's not coded for in the like DNA.
I'm glad you're here, Joe, to clarify these things. I'm just going to say something ridiculous.
I mean, I probably said it wrong. Listeners are probably yelling at me because I probably said mitochondrial DNA instead of RNA.
We're just two humans doing our best here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I harp on the tree example last time? I have like a distinct memory of like harping on the tree example.
Like the taking rest as a tree, or like the perception of a tree?
The perception of a tree.
I think in your heart, if you have more Grobos, I think you should get into it.
Well, I don't know if I brought it up last time, but like to me, it's essentially a restatement of this really old parable that I heard for the first time in relation to like I think like Vedic philosophy or something. That the story is like there's these like blind men who are like wandering around trying to like figure out what this object is. And like one of them feels it and he's like,
Is the elephant thing?
it's the elephant, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is feeling the ear and he's like, oh, it's like a really big palm leaf.
Yeah.
And the other one's like feeling the leg and he's like, no, it's a big tree. Like it's a
Yeah.
big sturdy tree. And then one feels like the trunk and he's like, oh, it's a snake, you know?
And the tail is like a brush or
Yeah.
brush or something.
Right. And it's like, the tree example seems to be essentially like another retelling of that story.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, well, the tree is one thing to like a microbe and one thing to like a bug and one thing to a human, but it's actually the same thing deep down. And my contention with that is like, in the elephant story, there is an elephant at the end of the day. Like the blind men are sort of like, they have an incomplete understanding of it, but it is there. Like there's an object that's there.
Yeah.
But if their perception is all that's creating the elephant, then there wouldn't be an elephant. There'd be this hybrid brush, tree trunk, palm leaf, snake thing, right? They're in error because there is a reality outside of their senses. But this story that we're getting from Seth is that our senses are reality. They're just the same. So there could be no elephant, you know? Like we couldn't be wrong. You see what I'm saying?
I remember you bringing up this quibble. Is this similar to like the optical illusion thing that you're bringing up? And I don't know if I was like ever fully like understanding, like, so they're perceiving the elephant in a limited fashion.
Right.
But someone that has the sense of sight claims to have the perception of the full thing.
Right. Well, and the elephant could claim to be an elephant, you know?
Right. Well, the elephant in a similar manner has whatever set of perceptors, senses that it's using to, you know, like perceive its own reality.
Right.
Like we do that with ourselves to some extent, but then ignore like our intuitions or our thoughts, or like think that they're built on the structure, the bodily structure, like in a materialistic point of view.
Yeah. And I guess the point is just sort of that, like, sometimes our intuitions are flat wrong, you know? And, like, that's one of the things that you can sort of discover by interacting with the physical world is, like, there's intuitions that humans reliably have about the world. And if you experiment, you can be shown to be incorrect, like, reliably. Like, somebody who hasn't seen an optical illusion will usually make the same mistake intuitively until they're shown the illusion, you know?
Right.
So the question becomes like, in revealing the illusion, am I actually further mystifying you into illusion by now confusing your basic intuitions and drawing like a second curtain of illusion over your face, you know? Because if that's the story, then sort of like materialist science is driving us not only down an incorrect road, but literally the opposite road of what Seth's describing.
Yeah, but are you finding that in conflict to what he's saying? Like,
well, yeah, because, you know, if the tree is like one thing to one thing, one thing to another thing, and one thing to another thing, it's like, is it actually still a tree, you know?
Yeah, but in the way that the five monks can, you know, if they kept on their path and they felt around and they felt the connecting material, like they would eventually come up with an elephant, even without the sense of sight, right?
Yeah, but that's sort of extending the metaphor too far, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
it's like saying in the classic like train like example, right? The trolley problem. It's like, well, why don't
ethical problem?
Yeah, it's like, well, why doesn't the guy tell all the people in the trolley to jump off the trolley? It's like, well, that's not the point. Like the point is that you can only construct the example to so much limits, right? Like you could say maybe the monks could like all get eye surgery and then they'd be able to see the elephant, but it's like that's kind of dodging around the point of the experiment.
I think and forgive me, listeners, if you're following this better than I am, but like, I think we need to like drill down because I'm still not understanding the quibble. Like, so you're saying an objective reality exists because there's something, it is something that's used to like correct our errors.
Here's another way of putting it. If the three monks can identify these three objects in their world, then we could leave the story at that. And say these three monks have identified three separate objects in the world. But in saying that they're the same object, we're saying something else. Like the very assumption that they're the same object
Yeah.
is the thing that, under Seth's perspective, we don't have the right to do anymore, right? Like, so Seth's sort of self-defeating if he says, the microbe can identify the tree that you're perceiving, but as something completely different. Then it would be like, well, me and the microbe are identifying different objects. We're actually not identifying the tree. The microbe's identifying something else.
By virtue of perceiving it completely different, it is something completely different.
It is something different.
Well, I think that
But
might
Seth
be...
identifies them as the same thing. So it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, or an example, like he talks about a cat perceives a bug to be, or a bug perceives a cat to be. But like, I think when they're all in the same room, there's a cat here, you're here, I'm here, there's a bug here. Then even if they're perceived completely differently, there is like something connecting them to being the same thing, right?
Right. But is that sensational or not?
Well, I think therefore he's pointing to a reality that exists outside the limitation of our sensations, of our physical sensations. And that's how he can definitively say that that's the same thing, because he's got this larger outside perspective of what we are, what all these consciousnesses are. As we've said before, he's claiming that we and everything in our physical world is like just a limited part of what fits into the rules of this game.
Right. But I feel like, and this is going to come up later too, that I think Seth plays very fast and loose with whether he wants the physical reality to be real or not real.
Well, he says it, yeah, we'll get into this. I think that's probably more chapter 3, but like he says it's one form of what reality could look like, but this is kind of the limitation thing. We've chosen this specific set of limitations to view reality.
Mm-hmm.
And he's claiming like an unimaginable, broad ability to perceive things.
Yeah, the thing that's missing there, though, is I don't think he ever wants to say, like, the materialist, physicalist description of the world is a perfectly valid way of understanding it, right? He doesn't want to say that.
I think it's valid, but it's limited, and he's saying that it's time that we graduate from that limitation.
I suppose. I don't know. I feel like the emphasis is not as strong. Okay. A lot of what's being...
I mean, it's coming up soon enough.
So, yeah, we can get to it.
Like, and I do enjoy that this could be like an ongoing thing. And
this is an ongoing... Yes. This is a beef that we now have with me and Seth.
I'm glad. We needed this. I should try to find this at some point too, but I was trying to think of this quote earlier in book club, but he does say like the dogmatist does way more damage than the like skeptic when they're both at their extremes, you don't want to be extremely one or the other, but if you had to be one.
If you have to be one, be a skeptic. Yeah. I agree with him on that.
Yeah. Well, it's actually right here on this page. It is not that physical reality is false. It is that the physical picture is simply one of an infinite number of ways of perceiving the various guises through which consciousness expresses itself. The physical senses force you to translate experience into physical perceptions. The inner senses open your range of perception, allow you to interpret experience in a far freer manner, and to create new forms and new channels through which you or any consciousness can know itself.
Right. And so we got to remember this, right? Because like here on page 26, he's saying the physical reality, it's not false.
Yeah.
But later on, he'll say the physical reality is merely an illusion. We can get to it in a little bit, but we'll see that it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're saying physical reality is not false, right?
This might be similar to like the cells regenerating every 7 years,
right,
kind of thing. I mean, I see exactly what you're saying as like, this isn't a good use of like technical specific language.
Like if you're using the word like false,
say this and to say that, they're kind of mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pin down where Seth is on this stuff. That's my point.
I just get the sense, and maybe I'm just giving him too much the benefit of the doubt, but that when he's saying it's an illusion, and we should find that too to see if there's contextual stuff either before or after.
Yeah.
But he's just trying to like poke holes in our just like dogmatic grip on materialism,
Sure. Yeah.
I think.
Did you have stuff on 27?
Um,
Because I was just going to ask you
yeah.
if you can explain the chair example, because I don't know what to make of that one. I think it's interesting. I think it's intriguing, but I don't know what it means.
Okay, so I have right before that a bunch of highlighted, so maybe that'll help. If you gained your sense of personal continuity through associative processes primarily rather than the result of the familiarity of a self moving through time, then you would experience physical reality in an entirely different fashion. Objects from past and present could be perceived at once, their presence justified through associative connections. So he drops this idea of association.
Yeah.
And when I was reading it earlier, it was making me think of this is kind of how our thoughts develop, I think. Have you ever just like, I used to do this a lot when I was a kid. I had trouble falling asleep and like hours would pass in bed and I'd be like, how did I get to be thinking about this?
Right.
And then I could follow it back, sometimes like it was like 20 different things, like.
But it's like a dream logic sort of thing.
It was all associative, like he's talking about.
Like you're talking about like, you're thinking about like dying and you're thinking about getting buried 12 feet deep. And then you start imagining 12 like actual shoes, and then you start thinking about a centipede and like, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's logic, but it doesn't follow.
Well, there's actually like tangents, like one thing brings up something else that is maybe the more shinier thing in your mind just goes along. And I think he's kind of saying that is a more normal way of, normal might be the wrong word, but like
it's an equally valid way.
Outside of, the way we perceive things as cause and effect through time, that is kind of how things are happening. And he's saying if you had this, and this might be part of an inner sense, that like you could perceive all of your father's favorite chairs at once.
Because they are not the same physical chair, but they're all the same in that they're your father's favorite chair. Yeah.
So if like in the way that you could think that your thoughts might go that direction, like if you thought of your father's favorite chair and then you just remembered, oh, he had like 3 of them through his lifetime. Like he's saying,
right,
outside of the rules of the game we're playing, you would just see those chairs if you wanted to or needed to. And the way he's talking about his environment is created by his current emotions or state, like the thoughts basically are external almost in a way and he's kind of saying that our physical reality is emulating that process in a weird specific way, that we're creating our reality, but not quite in the free, fast way that he can wherever he's at.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of like Freudian sort of like analysis, The idea of like interpreting things through these like very loose, like personal sort of associations.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because Freudian, he's kind of like the godfather of like depth psychology, right? Like going into symbols and dreams. And it's interesting that our culture like responded so strongly to that, like in a positive way.
Right. I think it was a thing that at least, Western European society like was kind of starved for, as this like very symbolic, like meaning rich way of like experiencing and understanding the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to get to that at some point.
We can do it now if you want.
It just reminded me of like, this is more of a philosophical question, but like, how do we know that anything's true? Like, I get the sense that like things just resonate. Yeah, at some point he's talking about like there's some people who read this material and like immediately like respond like yes to. And I think that's happening almost on every level, even if you're a materialist, if you're an idealist or anything in between, what you think of as true, like, and a materialist might claim, oh, it's because of the evidence. But the evidence by nature is something that resonates with what you think reality is.
Yeah.
And so we're all kind of operating on this sort of intuition to provide us like certainty about our picture of what the world is.
No, I think that's true. And I think that that's like philosophically very valid because like there's there's a certain level that you get to when you're studying things like, for example, like logic, right? Like there's some disagreement about like which logical rules actually should apply to the like quote unquote correct like mathematical form of logic.
Yeah.
And you have lots and lots of papers written about these things. And essentially what they're arguing over is like differences of intuition. And they're very clear about the fact that it's like, well, this doesn't make intuitive sense. Like there's a movement to put limitations on the law of non-contradiction, right? That like you can't have A and not A at the same time.
Yeah.
Where like you can give examples where intuitively speaking, it seems like you could have that. And the argument essentially just is like, well, based on intuition, it seems like it can be that way. And like one of the most interesting things to note is that historically, like it took someone to just come up to the point and be like, look, when we have disagreements about this, we don't point to the logic and say the rules are the rules. We point to our intuitions and say, do the rules correspond with how I think they should go? You know, they come from us. We can make them whatever we want to.
I like it. And I think it's very healthy for like every one of us to whatever extent we can to be aware of how that is happening.
Yeah.
I think we can get way less righteous about our own ideas once we understand that like this makes sense because it just makes sense to the way based on my experience or my intuitions. And that word intuition is just like so mysterious. Like, what do we even mean by that?
Right. Yeah.
But I think like what Seth is saying, and I kind of tend to agree that like it is referring to a different sort of source of knowledge than our perceptions give us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of things for which like the intuition is sort of seems to act independently from other forms of perception, you know?
Yeah.
Where there's this other content. It's not just sensory content, right? There's like meaning content.
Yeah.
And that can hit in like different ways. Like there are different colors or flavors to how that meaning content can hit your mind. And the fact that people can come to agreements on that, it's interesting, right?
Very interesting. I mean, this is kind of the little cliffhanger that you mentioned in the previous episode. There is a reason for such a trance, as you will discover, but little by little you must wake up. My purpose is to open your inner eyes. Maybe I should back up a little bit. He's still kind of explaining what he's intending to do, and he's telling us that we look out into the physical universe, and on our behalf, to the extent that we're paying attention to the Seth material, I will stand, figuratively speaking, in physical reality and look inward for you and describe those realities of consciousness and experience that you are presently too fascinated to see.
Right.
So I like that description of like what he's claiming to do here.
Yeah, where we're sort of like too fascinated with this like shiny toy in front of us.
Yeah.
And he has to come by and be able to sort of like whisper in our ear like, hey, you know, if you looked away from this really shiny, cool little toy you're looking at, there's these other things going on. Let me tell you what else is in the room.
Right. And maybe you should tell me, but like it seems pretty unique as a philosophy to like take this stance. I feel like a lot of philosophy is really trying to describe reality. Like I know like there's a lot of philosophy that like goes behind what we perceive and stuff, but he's like just literally saying like, you look this way, you know what you see, I'll look this way and I'll tell you what's going on.
I mean, I feel like there might be people who would listen to this and just be like shouting, you know, like the allegory of the cave, Michael, you're forgetting the allegory of the cave.
Okay. I guess they just seem categorically different to me in some way that I'm not able to like fully articulate, but I think it's something to do with what he's claiming he is versus our other sources of philosophy. Like we're almost like allowing, because if anyone else was saying this, I'd be like, how the fuck do you know, man?
Right.
You know?
Well, there are, you know, major thinkers in the past who have claimed divinity, right? Or divine inspiration.
That's true. That's true.
Where that's sort of their like justification for like, well, I can part the veil because I'm the son of this like God, or well, there's this angel speaking to me and, you know, I'll write down these tablets by looking in this hat or something like that.
You're right. So like, I don't know if like if maybe this is just my own personal intuition or resonance, as I'm just saying, but like I'm putting Seth in a different category. Like I'm not looking at him as like a religious figure or someone that's like claiming divinity, because I guess cynically I tend to like think of those people as like doing something for their own selves. They're like,
well, I mean, what else could it be if you have a person who's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to channel this higher being that comes from this like super magical universe in which they can create whatever reality they want, and they have a plan for you.
You're right.
And they're going to open your inner eye so that you can perceive the world in a totally radical way, and you can ascend to a higher plane of existence. Like, I don't know, man.
It's definitely along the same lines. I guess it's just, I'm giving it more credit because I've found like through, a deep experimental study that it has a internal complexity and consistency that it seems unparalleled.
Right. I'm excited for when we get to the back of the book and it teaches how to like exorcise demons and stuff, because I'm excited to experiment with that.
You finally get rid of those demons, Joe.
Yeah. Did you have stuff for the end of this chapter?
That was just kind of getting into it. All of your attention is focused in a highly specialized way upon one shining bright point that you call reality.
Yeah.
And that's where I jumped ahead. There is a reason for such a trance, as you will discover, but little by little you must wake up. My purpose is to open your inner eyes. So
wake up.
Yep.
Gotta wake up.
That's a religious message.
Born
again, woken up. Yeah.
You gotta unchain yourself from the cave where you see only shadows.
Yeah.
You have to walk out into the light.
And like the optimistic or the glass half full way of like looking at all those things was like seeing like the right intention was there. Like that was just trying to communicate something similar.
Well, I think that's what any enlightenment feels like.
Yeah.
It really does feel like a complete transformation of the world you actually live in into a completely new world with like much brighter, colors and experiences and meanings attached to it.
Yeah. One thing I really liked when I was getting into Buddhism that the Buddha basically said, and it seemed unique among all religious figures. He said, "Don't take my word for it." He said, "Try this." Like that's the distinction I was focusing on, was that he was giving us meditation and showing us how to actually see reality in a deeper way and to come to our own conclusions through the practice of meditation. But I'm sure there's other religions where you can point to like, so-and-so said this. I just focused on that part where he's like, don't take my word for it. Wherein every other religious figure seems to be saying like, no, I know. Take my word for it.
They're not like, you can have a trial period.
And Seth is kind of doing both, I think. He's like, take my word for it. I know. But he's also giving us a lot of practical advice that, we can come to our own conclusions with.
Right. Yeah. I'm excited. Is there like a equivalent to like meditation that he eventually gets to?
He talks about something in typical Seth fashion. It's just so vaguely put, but he talks about psi time.
Psi time? Like PSI?
I don't know why he settled on that term. And that seems like very of that era too.
Yeah.
But basically you just kind of like lay down for 20 minutes and you, like meditation, you just pay attention. But unlike it, you're not like focusing on your breath or anything or trying to like get rid of your thoughts. You're just like following where your attention goes. Maybe along those lines of that associative, whatever you were saying about the associative process.
Like self-analysis a little bit.
But I think what ends up happening a lot is you kind of start having a daydream. And then the more attention you can give it, the more, it's like paying attention to our thoughts or anything. You realize you might have more power and control and there might be more validity to it than you thought. He kind of talks about that as being an entry point. And later he talks about like how to like go into different sorts of trances and stuff. And there's a ton of practical stuff.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. The esoterica. It's always my jam. I like the nuance of like, okay, practically speaking, here's how you have to set up the room. Here's how you got to.
I mean, I'll tell you like a little bit. The most interesting stuff to me is like hypnosis and suggestion.
Yeah.
And he's telling us that everything is suggestion.
Yeah.
Like we look at this, we're talking about chairs and tables and the validity of their physical reality, but like we think that because it's continually suggesting us through our beliefs that it is this way.
Right.
And he's kind of saying everything operates this way.
That's some fertile ground.
It is.
Interesting.
It's kind of like, it's almost so self-evident that it's not saying anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of saying like everything that comes into all knowledge that you receive is affecting your perspective.
Well, I think it'll link up too when we talk about the play,
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fun good evening.